Let me ask you a question. Have you ever read or heard somebody say something like this? The problem with metal today is all the elitist gatekeepers, man. I've certainly seen that said, but I haven't actually seen any of the gatekeeping that they're complaining about. I don't think gatekeeping is real. So on episode 204 of Heavy Metal Philosophy, I'm going to explain why I don't think people are being kept out of metal and what it is that people are mistaking for gatekeeping. I will also carve out one possible exception to the rule and have on a couple of illustrious guests to explain their point of view. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, Jon Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's riff of the week. Now, I'm not saying that people don't attempt to gatekeep metal. Attempts are made all day, every day. But what I am saying is if someone ever says to you, that's not real metal, or calls you a poser, or demands that you name 3 bands, if that keeps you from loving metal, then you probably didn't love metal to begin with. And I want to be real clear here. I am not condoning those rude comments. Anybody that says something like that to you, I hope they get stuck in the break room with that coworker who says, "How was your weekend, John? I know, not long enough, right?" But I can tell you personally, every time some low social skill having weirdo has something rude to say about me wearing some random band's shirt, my response is always the same. It's usually no response, but inside I'm thinking, okay. I have never and will never stop listening to a band because it seems uncool. I don't listen to metal to be cool. I listen to metal because I love metal, and nobody can stop me. If I want to make a playlist that's a mix of Testament and Bad Omens and Halloween and Cannibal Corpse, there's nothing that anybody can do to stop me. And I'm not saying that I'm some sort of tough guy or some Superman who's invincible and impervious. What I am saying is, what mechanism does anybody have to stop me? Who is on the committee that decides what is or isn't metal? What authority do we go to ask for permission to buy records, attend shows, and wear merch? Gatekeeping isn't real. We should call it by its actual name. What gatekeeping is simply people being rude. Or maybe it's not even being rude. I see on social media all the time, somebody will make a post about a band that they like, and inevitably somebody on the internet will not like that band, and they'll leave a comment like, "That band sucks, actually." That's not gatekeeping. That's someone having an opinion. Granted, it's an unsolicited opinion. They definitely could have kept that to themselves, but it is social media after all. And at the end of the day, you can still love that band. They can't stop you. It feels bad to read that comment, but let me ask you a question. What if your brother said that to you? Or your best friend? I've had a million discussions in real life with friends, and we, of course, have different preferences from each other, and we will explain which bands we like and which ones we don't. We don't begrudge each other for liking different things. Now, we will do some light roasting of each other, all in good fun, of course, but for some reason, when a stranger on the internet does it, it feels worse. We have to keep in mind that these are randos out of billions of people on the internet. What does their opinion matter anyway? Now, with that being said, I do have one exception to the rule that we should probably discuss. I realized as I was writing this episode that a lot of this is really easy for me to say because I'm a man and there's a lot of things that I just don't have to deal with. I've never been made to feel unsafe at a show or inferior. So I decided to ask a few peers of mine who happen to be female what their experience with gatekeeping is. First up, you all know and love her, my friend and yours, Lindsay from the Heavy Metal Journal. Lindsay, host of the Heavy Metal Journal, writer for Lamb Goat, writer for the Moshville Times, and co-host of Hell Hath No Fury. Welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm very glad to have you. Let me tell you why. So I'm working on an episode, and my basic premise is that gatekeeping doesn't really exist. I feel like if somebody says something rude to you and it makes you not like metal, then perhaps you didn't really love metal all that much to begin with. But as I'm brainstorming it, I realize, well, this is easy for me to say because I'm a man and I don't have to deal with some of the things that females have to deal with. So I figured it'd be best if I reach out to some females and say, okay, well, what is your perspective on this?
Well, my perspective on it is I'm inclined to agree with you. Now, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for my peers. But when it comes to somebody turning around to me and saying, you know, your opinion on metal is wrong because of X, Y, and Z, cool. I'm not going to change my opinion because of your opinion. If you have a deep set love for something like metal, and this is across the board, but metal in particular, if you have a deep set love for it, regardless of what subgenre you prefer, regardless of the band, if you love it, you love it. And that's the end of the story.
I 100% agree, you know, because especially since you bring up subgenres, there's so many different kinds of metal fans. You know, black metal fans are definitely their own subculture, and old school thrash heads. And then you take like metalcore fans, the old school fans will be like, oh, that's not really metal. It's like, okay, cool, I guess. Yeah. Whatever. If you really love what you love, you'll continue to go on loving what you love. But I do have a sympathetic part of me that wonders, like, yeah, but what about times when people are made to feel unsafe?
Yeah, I can understand that as well. I have been approached a couple of times, not often. It doesn't happen to me very often when it comes to people arguing their case against me or for me or whatever. But I have been approached a couple of times by some very volatile people saying that I don't know anything about this band because I haven't heard of this obscure band, and, you know, you're just a poser. And I have had it a couple of times where, you know, somebody says to me, you're a girl, you're not meant to like metal and things like that. And it's very stereotypical. It is a cliche, but it does happen on occasion. And sometimes when you're put on the spot like that and you're not aware of it happening and you don't expect it to happen, it can be really quite confrontational. I don't really think it's a gender specific thing myself. I think this can be across the board regardless, but as a female, I can only speak for myself, it can be quite intimidating and it can be quite aggressive.
Sometimes I think that when people do things like that, it's really not about us, it's really about them. It's a way it's a way for them to say, look how refined my taste is as a metalhead. I am so much better because my taste in music is so exquisite. And it's like, okay, impressive, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I think oftentimes when I have discovered it, there has been a sense of, it's like a hierarchy. It's weird. It's like a holier than thou kind of situation, and almost a sense of entitlement as well at the same time. Like, for example, the other day I put up a post on Blue Sky, the new social media platform, about the Trivium and Bullet from a Valentine show that I went to. And I wasn't forcing my opinion down anybody's throat. I was just talking about my own experiences at the show. I really enjoyed the show. It was an absolutely fantastic show. These bands were bands that I listened to religiously when I was a teenager. I'm 36 now, so 20 years of listening to these bands. Phenomenal show. Ascend and Say by Trivium is one of my favourite ever albums. And paraphrasing badly, but that's what I put out there. And somebody came along and went, no, you're wrong. They're not as influential as you think they are. Well, I never once said that they were influential to the masses. I just said that they were influential to me. Why are you so hurt? Why are you coming at me about my own personal opinion on music? Again, it's subjective. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. You should just let people love what they love. Simple as.
Social media is the worst for reading comprehension skills.
Yeah.
So many times people will come and reply, and I'll be like, I never once said the thing that you're saying that I said.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't make any sense. And you're absolutely right. I think that says more about the person that's attacking rather than the person that they are attacking, if you know what I mean. These people were obviously hurt in some way or other at some point down the line. But in terms of gatekeeping in general, I don't necessarily believe that gatekeeping is a thing. I think there's a lot of butthurt people out there.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily think that gatekeeping is a thing because nobody is burning your CDs in front of you.
Right.
Nobody is coming into your home and ripping your posters down or your flags down from your wall. Nobody is ripping your headphones or cutting off your internet connection so you can't stream anymore. Nothing like that is happening. There's just some really angry people on the internet that disagree with you. And, that's going to happen. The only time I would say that gatekeeping could potentially be a thing, and this isn't just for metal, I think it's across the board, is when you're wearing a band shirt. If it looks cool, awesome, but you're going to end up getting questioned on it. So, for example, a long time ago, I approached a colleague of mine who had an AC/DC t-shirt on. And it was a really cool t-shirt. It was like a black and white kind of like newspaper print kind of shirt. And I didn't know that she loved AC/DC, and I didn't really know her that well. So I took that as a conversation starter. Oh, I love your shirt. That is such a cool band. I didn't know that you listened to them. And then she turns around and said, I have no idea who you're talking about. I just like the shirt. Okay, fine. But one, you're going to look stupid. And two, you're going to have a very, very, very disappointed person in front of you who wanted to make a new friend because of the shirt that you're wearing. And now there's this awkward situation where nobody really knows what they're going to do. And I just think that's really dumb. So if you're going to wear a band shirt, at least know who the band is. But in terms of gatekeeping, I think that's probably where I draw the line.
I love that story because that is the that's the other end of the spectrum from the story I normally hear. It's normally I was wearing a shirt and somebody came up to me and told me to name 3 songs. So that gives a perspective, maybe I was just trying to start a conversation, but this person that's going name 3 songs, maybe they're just rude, first of all, super rude, but also socially awkward, low skills,
Yeah.
But I've done that too. Like, okay, so my bass player loves Primus. Go figure. The bass player loves Primus.
Of course.
So Primus came to town and he's like, you want to go see Primus? And I just like hanging out with my friend and I love concerts. So hell yeah, let's go see Primus. I don't hate Primus. It's just, I guess I could name 3 songs. Wynonna's Big Brown Beaver, Jerry Was a Race Car Driver, My Name Is Mud. But I couldn't name 3 songs off of any album, probably not even name 3 albums. Nothing against them. I just don't know them like that. But I'm at a Primus concert. I buy Primus merch, of course. That's what you do. So another concert, I'm wearing my Primus hoodie because it's semi-chilly. Yeah. And I'm waiting in line and somebody comes up and like starts, Primus, and like humming a melody from one of the songs. And I was just like, what do I do?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different perspectives when it comes to that. I mean, that's slightly different because, you've heard of Primus and you've just named 3 songs. So, that's a starter. But regardless of whether they were a metal fan or not, I would not go up to a random stranger, whether it's on the street or in a show, and point at their shirt and say, prove to me that you know who this band is by naming 3 songs. I think that's just rude. There's like an etiquette. There's a sense of decorum that you have to have, and unfortunately, the situation that I was in, I just got overexcited and I wanted to make a new friend in terms of music. And I think we were both horribly disappointed and awkward in that situation. And then I had to run away. But I think there's, you wouldn't go up to like a random person in the street who is wearing like a horror film shirt because like a friend of my same friend who's just got into metal, she's a huge horror fan, and she has different horror shirts and stuff. You wouldn't go up to somebody and say, "I bet you've not seen that movie. Who is this obscure support background character in this movie? If you don't know who that is, if you don't know who the extra is, you're not a fan of that movie." The same thing kind of applies to metal. You just don't do that to people. Don't make people feel rubbish about what they like, how they discovered it, and how they pursue it. It's not going to hurt anybody.
If I wore a Hellraiser shirt, I love Hellraiser, and somebody's like, "Oh, well, have you seen this?" No, I have not seen all the Hellraiser movies. There's 25 of them. No,
Yeah.
no.
Well, you're not a real fan then.
What's your favorite Cenobite? I don't know, man. And if you do go up to somebody and go, "Name 3 songs," like if they fail, now what do you do?
Yeah.
Rip their shirt off and get out of the venue. You're not allowed to go to this concert.
Yeah. Shame. Like, no, I don't think we should be going up to people and be like, name 3 tracks, That's not personally happened to me, thankfully. I know it has happened to my peers, and I know a lot of my peers do suffer more from this than I do. I don't know what it is about me. I don't know if it's because I'm Scottish and scary that I don't have people approach me that way. I don't know. But I have seen other people, both in real life and, in the community online, having to suffer all sorts of gatekeeping because of the kind of music they like, because they're female, because they're male, because they're, somewhere in between or something else, because they discovered it 40 years down the line compared to everybody else. I don't think it should matter. If you support it and if you love it, it can't be taken away from you.
Yeah. Sorry for not being born in 1975, yo.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you one more thing, because
Sure.
the perspective I'm coming at this from is as a fan. I just don't think that anybody can stop you from being a fan of metal if that's what you truly love. And I've said it before. I think metal is love. I don't think you can really be apathetic about it. You're either going to hate it or love it.
Yeah.
But I am sympathetic to, because I do believe that there's gatekeeping in jobs. So as somebody who works in the industry, have you experienced some sort of obstacles that you don't think you otherwise would have in the industry?
Honestly, for me personally, I'm a very small fish in a very large ocean in terms of that. I'm very new to the scene. I've been doing it for 3-4 years now almost. And I wouldn't go as far to say that I myself have struggled in the industry as a female in the industry. Again, I know my peers have for various different reasons. But me myself, I wouldn't go as far to say that I have experienced gatekeeping in the industry. I've been very lucky that way.
That's good to hear. Have you ever had, you're interviewing a band and they treat you some way, you go, would they have treated Jon Barbas that way, or the dudes from Bangers and Mosh, or,
Once or twice, yes, actually, now that you mention it. I'm 36 years old and I don't have time for nonsense. I really don't. I don't tend to take a lot of things personally. So at the time, if those things do happen, I don't tend to register it. It isn't until after I've been asked a question like that and I think back, like, actually, you might have had a point there. I'm not going to name names, but there have been a couple of artists, musicians, bands that I have encountered who have been quite, for lack of a better term, gatekeepy because of who I am. Again, I am a very small fish in a very large ocean. And because I'm female, it does happen on occasion. And it's not necessarily what people say to you. It's not necessarily the words. It's the way somebody talks to you, the way they look at you, the way they hold themselves, the way that they make their little micro expressions like they don't have time for you, or you don't know what you're talking about. that has happened, unfortunately. And it's not fair because, you can't really garner what a person is like and the extent of their knowledge in a 30-minute conversation over Zoom, or over email and things like that. So yes, in regards to that side of things in the industry, there is an element of gatekeeping. Absolutely.
Yeah, I just picturing you like editing the episode and you're like, what that motherfucker just say to
Yeah,
me?
exactly. I'm like, I saw that this time. What do you mean by that? It happens. Yeah.
Before we go, you're people talk about how do you have the time? How do you have the time? You're starting another show with Faye, otherwise known as the Death Metal Mom. Again, somebody who's working super hard. She's got her own show. She does
Yeah.
PR for Redefining Darkness Records.
Mm-hmm.
And now y'all are starting another show called Hell Hath No Fury for the Lamb Goat Podcast Network.
Yes, that's right. I am having to sacrifice sleep. That's the only answer. That's the only answer I have for that. I get it done for the most part. How? I don't have an answer for you, man. I'm sorry. Lots of caffeine and no sleep. That's the only answer I have.
Well, when does the show launch?
We are actually planning on recording our first episode this coming Tuesday. So I don't have an exact time scale as of yet, but it will be very, 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 very soon in the near future.
Awesome. And is there like a basic theme or goal or something that the show's going to be about?
This is an exclusive. This is sneaky.
All
So
right.
it's not going to be a review show because that's an oversaturated media. I already do it for Lamb Goat, for the Moshville Times, and for my own channel. So it's not going to be a review channel. So we will talk about music and what we're listening to and stuff because obviously we're both metalheads. That's what we do. But we're going to be looking at the social side of the metal world, such as gatekeeping, such as situations where, situations that you've encountered at live shows, discrimination and things like that. And not just that, but also news articles that are coming out about different bands and things. This band's broken up, or a controversy about this kind of band, or this singer, or this drummer, or etc., etc. So it's more kind of like a social side of the metal world rather than deep dives into reviews and things like that. It will be in there in the mix a little bit, but it's more kind of like an opinion show or like a conversation show.
I'm excited about that because I got a little mild confession. I'm sure you're probably the same way. It's no big deal, but I I purposely avoid some of the other metal content creators, especially on the review side, because I don't want my own opinion to be influenced. So
Yes.
Sometimes, for instance, the album of the year season, I absolutely don't watch anybody else's
Yeah.
until after mine is done. So
Yes.
now I get to go back and watch some of my friends. I feel bad, like, oh man, I'm not supporting my friends, but I also have to kind of safeguard the input that comes in. But this show, I feel like, oh yeah, I can listen to this one and just be entertained.
Yeah, it's for entertainment and it's to generate conversation, really. On certain points. I'm much like you. Even on my weekly show, I will refuse point blank to watch yours until mine is done. Just in case, there's a crossover. It's the same with the Bangers and Mosh guys. Any kind of podcast or YouTube channel that reviews music and things like that, and even in a written format as well. If I'm writing an album review, I will not look at anybody else's. I will just write down my thoughts and I will upload it. And then as soon as it's published by the editors, that's when I'll read somebody else's. Also, it's a really cool way to discover new music for yourself, even as a reviewer, because again, there's so much music out there. There's not enough time in the day to encounter absolutely everything. So the amount of bands that I've picked up from yourself, from the Bangers and Mosh guys, from Faye, her Headbangers podcast, various other networks and outlets. I've discovered so many new bands after the fact, after these top 40 albums of the year lists have went up. And I'm really grateful for that. Absolutely.
Me too. And I'm really grateful to have your input on this matter. It certainly helps. And if y'all want to catch, first of all, everybody that listens to Heavy Metal Philosophy probably already is listening to the Heavy Metal Journal, but just in case, I'll put your info in the description. But more importantly, follow Lindsay on social media so you can see when the Hell Hath No Fury podcast launches, and you can follow along that. I certainly will be. Thank you so much for joining me today, Lindsay.
Thank you for having me. It's appreciated.
Y'all make sure y'all follow Lindsay. I'll have her socials in the description so you can keep a lookout for that Hell Hath No Fury announcement. But with that being said, one person is just not a big enough sample size to draw any definitive conclusions. So I have one more guest to talk to who has a slightly differing opinion. Here's my friend Val from the Vigorously podcast. Val Kleinhans from the Vigorously podcast. Welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
What's up? I'm ready for this. This is fun.
Very good. Very good. So I'm working on an episode on gatekeeping, and my basic premise is that I don't really believe in gatekeeping that much. I think if somebody says something rude to you and that prevents you from liking metal, maybe you weren't really a metalhead to begin with. And as I'm working through this, I think to myself, well, some of this stuff is real easy for me to say because I'm a man and I don't have to put up with some of the things that women have to. So there's a whole realm of experience that I don't have as I'm formulating my thoughts. So I thought the best thing to do is reach out to some women metalheads that I know. So Val, what do you think about gatekeeping in metal?
I think gatekeeping exists. I mean, it does, but I don't know that it's as prevalent as it was, we'll say, in the 90s. I mean, I was around then. Perhaps the 80s as well. I mean, Lemmy has been on the record about, talking about how other dudes would shit on Girls' School. And he thinks that they're some of the best guitarists, around. I mean, it obviously existed. And I think there's parts of it that still exists, but I think it's become less and less prevalent now because we do have more co-ed acts, I'll call them, and we do have more female-fronted acts, and we have legacy female-fronted acts now. So I think the boys are getting used to seeing the girls, and they're not feeling like the girls are encroaching on their territory for insidious reasons, because I think that's where the whole gatekeeping thing originates when it comes across genders. I think dudes will question women because they're like, no, this is my thing that I do with my guys because I want to be a fucking dude and I just want to take my shirt off and wave it above my head and do stupid shit with my other guys. And I don't want girls, no girls allowed, He-Man Woman Haters Club. Like, this is my thing that I do with my guys. I don't want women involved. But I think that's changing because, again, we're just seeing a greater presence. We're looking at Spirit Box now. Arch Enemy is one of those legacy bands that are female fronted. Lacuna Coil is another example. I mean, the fact that they're as prevalent as they are and that they're showing their face and they're showing that they've been here for decades at this point, I think we're starting to get used to the concept of a female presence being around. I mean, I've been on the other end of gatekeeping bullshit thousands of times, mostly online. Very rarely does it happen in real life outside of high school. Yeah. If you're above the age of 18, you probably really don't care and you're at a show for the music and you just want to enjoy the show because you want to hear the music. You're not really worried about what anybody else is doing or who's there and if they're there for legitimate reasons. But in high school, that's when you get the whole name 3 songs guy. A lot of women, in metal, a lot of female metalheads have been visited by the name 3 songs guy. And I come across that, I think, more often online than I ever did in real life. And the way that I get around that is just by simply returning the energy that comes my way. I had a dude roll up one time and say, oh, you're wearing a Slayer shirt? I bet you don't even listen to Slayer. I bet you can't even name me a favorite album or a favorite song. And I just simply very matter-of-factly responded, Hanneman or Holt era, period. And he was like, oh, I see you have taught well, young, you have been taught well, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to return that energy to you, bro. Like, if you really want to call me out, fine, let's talk music. But then the fact that he backtracked made me feel like, okay, he was really just trying to troll, not a genuine, true fan. But I don't know. I think just as we get used to the physical presence of women, I think the gatekeeping across genders anyway becomes less and less. And taking gender out of the equation, my personal opinion, I think some of the gatekeeping as to like, this is truly what metal is, and this subgenre is metal, and this and what's new today really isn't, and blah, 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 blah. There's constant debates on that. You see the same things that I do online. But I think that's also evolving. And the true metalheads are the ones that are going to say, let me encourage Gen Z with the synths and the electronic sounds that they're adding, to up and coming metal bands that are becoming, Legacy X. Somebody like a Spirit Box, for example, who's using that type of sound, the gent sounds, that kind of thing. I'm like, great. That's your generation's thing. That's your version of this thing that we, rose to prominence in the 70s, and now it's your turn to carry the torch. And I think true metalheads will see through that and see that this is all that's happening. So let's encourage it, because y'all are furthering what we love so much. I don't know. That's a lot on gatekeeping right there, but
no, that's great.
Those are my general thoughts.
That's a great point about girl school too, because I sort of took for granted that a lot of that work has already been done.
Yes.
I grew up in a post Lita Ford world. I was in college during Angela era, Arch Enemy's heyday, so all the hard work and all the suffering's already been done by time I'm starting to figure out what's what. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And at shows, I go to shows and I see girls all the time. And to your point about it mostly happening on the internet, I don't see really anybody giving those girls a hard time.
No.
Part of that's probably because I don't run in crews that would do that, but
yeah, because we're smart.
For the life of me, I could not understand why anybody would want less females in metal.
Right, it would get boring. It would get stale. Otherwise, I would think.
I want females around.
Doesn't every dude want females around? If you're a heterosexual man, doesn't every heterosexual man want dudes around from the time you're or want girls around from the time you're 10 and up, pretty much? Come on. What would be, but back to what I said earlier, I think the root of that is it was they made it a boys club because they wanted it to be, and it was this territory that they felt like was sacred, and they wanted to keep it as their own. Again, this is my guy time. This is what I want to do with my dudes. I don't want women a part of this. And that's why some of the attitude came their way. But women have had decades to prove themselves now too.
Yeah. And I did an episode a while back about, does listening to metal make us tough? Do you have to be a tough guy to listen to metal? And I find that to be kind of ridiculous, because it's just music. Now, granted, it's very angry music.
Yeah.
But, the guys performing it are all pencil necked, big hair.
Yes.
Painted fingernails, tights. You know what I'm saying? and so that's not where I look for my masculine pursuits.
Right. This whole conversation is taking me back to Metal: A Headbanger's Journey. That's one of my favorite documentaries of all time that Sam Dunn dedicates, I think, a whole portion of that documentary. It's really just a sociological look at metal and its culture. But there is a portion that specifically does focus on gender and what you're talking about. And it's so weird how somehow we're okay with this, and yet we're also okay with the glam metal bands from the 80s too. There was some confusion there. But we accepted it all.
Even more recently, rest in peace, Alexi from Children of Bodom, one of my guitar heroes, and Are We Dead Yet is one of my favorite records. But if I need to do some carpentry work on the barn, Alexi's not going to be the bro that I call to help me. You know what I'm saying?
You're not gonna put on Poison when you need to just run a drill or whatever.
I'm going to call one of my neighbors that's got some forearms and his hands aren't smooth, and he probably doesn't listen to metal.
What's he listening to? Probably maybe country. Maybe country.
Yeah, country, classic rock. Like it's just music. The
Yeah.
masculinity portion, I get it because it's angry music, but I don't get it because
Right.
I am a musician and I know the people that make this music.
Do you think that I have it correct on the male perspective on that, though? That dudes just don't want women to encroach on their territory, or at least at one time, that was how they felt?
I think dumbass dudes are like that. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot
Well,
of
yeah.
there's a
Right.
lot of dumbass dudes. Like, what are you talking about? Why would you drive the women away?
Oh, wait, duh. Like, God, you're ruining it for all of us. Where are the guys that say that? I'd like to hear that too. Where are the other guys that are like, is no one seeing that you're chasing the women away and that affects all of us who want a girl in our life? Or at least the majority of us maybe in this room.
Yeah. Or you know,
Yeah.
just if I go to a show and there's only dudes there,
Mm-hmm. That's
you
a
know,
sign.
I'm married, so it's not like I'm going there to pick up chicks. I'm not
Right.
going to Septic Flesh to pick up chicks. Okay.
No, nobody is.
But if I walk into a club and there's only dudes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to feel as at ease. I'm going
It's
to
a little sus.
I'm going to make sure I know where the exits are. You know, I'm going to take
Right.
stock of the energy in the pit and who's being aggressive. You know what I mean? If I see girls at the show, I go, okay, it's a normal show. I can relax.
That's right. See, if I were to put myself in a guy's shoes, that's what I would be thinking. I would be like, am I walking into Fight Club right now? Like, because some Amon Amar shows are like that. I've been to plenty of Amon Amar shows, which are, for me as a female, is fantastic because I have full access to the bathroom whenever I want, and I'm never waiting in line. I'm never waiting in line. But you know, when I go to those types of shows, I mean, yes, I'm going because I personally like the music, but yeah, I pay attention, and I'm like, there's a lot of dudes here, and this is about to be Fight Club as soon as Cry of the Blackbirds hits. Like as soon as that happens, there are people going to be taken out on stretchers, and it's dudes that just want to get that aggression out. And I don't know that they're necessarily, well, some are. I think some are there for the music, some are there to party, some are there to get that aggression out. So yeah, if I were a dude, I would take a second look and be like, is this about to be a Tyler Durden situation? Do I want that in my life? No.
Yeah, and I've always been a thrash death guy, so concerts that I've gone to have all been kind of normal. I don't really have much experience in like the hardcore scene where there's like crowd killing and stuff. So I don't really know. I don't really have the perspective to speak on that so much. But when I see videos nowadays, I see girls in the audience at hardcore shows now.
Right. I do think that some of that is changing, and I think that is a good thing. I think that's a healthy thing for a lot of reasons.
I definitely agree. I've had the same experience that most of the quote gatekeeping that I've seen has been online. People talking shit online. I've never seen that at a show. I've also, speaking of fakes, I've also argued that I don't really know how many posers there are. You know, that's like the worst insult you could throw at a metalhead, like call him a poser. But who's posing as a Cannibal Corpse fan? Like, what are you going to gain from pretending?
Why? You're willingly posing as somebody who is an outcast in society generally. Like, you're willingly putting yourself in that spot. Like, no, who's going to do that?
I don't believe it. I do believe that there are varying degrees of fandom. So relative to a super fan, somebody that's more of a casual might seem less true than the hardcore, but they're just not as hardcore as you. That doesn't mean that they don't like metal.
No, their fandom could be just beginning.
Yeah.
If I met that person, that's what I would think.
Or to the name 3 songs question, there's band shirts that I wear. I could not name 3 songs. So, for instance,
said this. Thank you.
I went and saw Holder.
Women everywhere. Yeah.
And the opening band was a band called Necrofire. Never seen this band before in my life. They blew me away. I was like, God, these guys are awesome. So I bought a shirt and a flag that I hung up in my gym. And
cool.
You know, if I wear that shirt and somebody was to ask me to name 3 songs, sorry, can't do it. You know?
Yeah. But does it matter? You still
doesn't
supported
matter.
the scene. You
not only
supported
that,
the scene.
but in metal, the fucking song titles are like, you know, putrefying the stench coming from the corpses after a genocide in another planet that was done by a necromancer. Like, no, I don't know these song titles.
I can't even remember them. Though
Yeah.
they're paragraphs long.
So
No, I feel you on that. Yeah. To me, especially if you're buying the merch, if you're buying the flag that you're going to put up in your gym, like you're still supporting the scene. I think you're a good egg in my book if you're doing those types of things. Really, anybody. I would say that to anybody. You don't need to name 3 songs on the spot, because who can remember 3 songs on the spot? Number one, and number two, what does that really prove?
right.
You have a
What
good
if
memory.
they
That's
fail the test? Then what happens?
That
Do you
doesn't mean
own
that-
the venue? Can you remove them from the show?
Do you take the band from them? No,
Yeah.
everybody gets the band. Everybody gets the band. And like, that's a memory test. Now that we're talking
Right.
about it, that's all.
And I've
that's all
got brain
that
damage, so
is. That's all that is. That's just a memory test. It doesn't make you any more or less of a fan. To me, it doesn't mean you have any more or less passion. People show love, it just in general, in different ways. Why can't they do that with metal and their love of metal? I mean, so yeah, I'm open to all forms of showing appreciation for the genre, and I'm glad to see that gatekeeping is not as prevalent as I feel like it was.
well, in conclusion, now that we've had this conversation, what say you? Does gatekeeping exist, not exist, or sometimes it exists?
I think sometimes it exists, and if it does, it's mainly online. That's where I'm going to leave it. It's that's where I'm going to say. I think it's not as prevalent as it was in the 80s and 90s, but it happens once in a while online. That's what I'll say.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Val. Y'all check out the Vigorously podcast with Val Kleinhans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, that did change my opinion slightly after talking to Val, so y'all make sure that y'all follow her. I will have her socials in the description as well. I admit I sort of took for granted the times we're living in and the progress that we've made. And it's not like we don't still have some areas that we could improve when it comes to women in metal. But all in all, I'd say we've come a long way, and we should definitely be thankful to the pioneers who got us to this point. And here, I should probably also remind everybody about the episode I made talking about countries where metal is illegal. In that episode, I talked about people who are suffering actual persecution for being metalheads. And unfortunately, I have the great displeasure of informing you all, the news just hit my inbox this week, that Atash from Caboose, who I talked about in that episode, his court appeal to the Norwegian government was denied, and he will be deported back to Iran, where he will most likely face severe punishment for being a black metal fan and also for performing black metal in front of the Iranian embassy in Norway. So that's bad. So it's pretty important to keep in mind that my opinion on gatekeeping is coming from a pretty highly privileged position in a Western country. Because in some places, gatekeeping actually is real. And not just from the government, but the metalheads themselves must thoroughly gatekeep their underground shows to try to keep the authorities from finding out. Could you imagine being snitched on to the Gestapo for having a mosh pit? So I really hope for mercy for Atash and gratitude from all of you. You want to learn more about Atash and places where metal is oppressed? Then click right here if you're on YouTube. If you're listening audio only, the link will be in the description. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.